2 days before my birthday, I found $14,000 missing from my account. My sister said, "We used it for a family vacation. You never do anything for us anyway." My mom added, "You'll make it back. We deserve this." I didn't cry. I just smiled, filed a fraud report, froze the accounts, and called the bank. 3 days later, they were stranded abroad with maxed out cards, a canceled return flight, and a warranted investigation for identity theft. I, 32M, was sitting at my desk when the notification popped up on my phone. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. I stared at it for a solid 10 seconds before checking my banking app. The number that appeared made my stomach drop through the floor. My savings account, the one I'd been building for 3 years, the one that had $14,347 in it that morning, showed a balance of $219. My hands started shaking. I refreshed the app 3 times. The number didn't change. I scrolled through the transaction history and felt something cold settle in my chest. 5 large withdrawals over the past 48 hours. Amounts ranging from $2,000 to $3,500. All of them authorized through my linked checking account, transferred out in chunks that wouldn't trigger the bank's automatic fraud alerts. Someone had systematically drained my savings. I called the bank immediately. The representative confirmed what I already knew. The transfers were initiated using my login credentials and security information. No signs of external hacking. Whoever did this knew my passwords, my security questions, my account numbers. My birthday was in 2 days. I'd taken the week off work, planning to finally book that trip to Colorado I'd been postponing for years. Instead, I was staring at financial ruin. I sat there in my apartment, trying to figure out who could have accessed my information. I was careful with my passwords. I didn't write them down. I didn't share them. Except, my mother had asked me to help her set up online banking 6 months ago. I'd logged into my account on her computer to show her how the interface worked. And my sister had been there too, sitting on the couch with her laptop, supposedly working on her grad school applications. I felt sick. I called my mom. She answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear background noise, people talking, music playing, the kind of ambient sound you get in a busy restaurant or hotel lobby. I asked her where she was. She said they were having dinner. I asked her who they were. She listed off my sister, my brother-in-law, and my 2 nephews. I asked her where exactly they were having dinner. There was a pause. Then she told me they were in Cancun. The words didn't register at first. I asked her to repeat herself. She said it again, Cancun, Mexico. They'd flown out 2 days ago. It was a family vacation they'd been planning for a while. She sounded defensive already, like she knew what was coming. I asked her how she paid for it. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said they'd used my money. She said it casually, like she was telling me they'd borrowed my car for a grocery run. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. She continued talking, filling the silence. She explained that they'd needed a break. My sister had been stressed with grad school. The kids needed quality time with their grandmother. They'd looked at my account and seen I had money just sitting there, not doing anything. It seemed wasteful. They figured I wouldn't mind. After all, I never did anything for the family anyway. I never visited. I never helped with expenses. I never contributed to family events. This was the least I could do. I asked her if she was seriously trying to justify stealing $14,000 from me. She got defensive then. She said it wasn't stealing. We were family. Family shares resources. I made good money. I'd make it back in a few months. They deserved this vacation. They'd been struggling. My sister's husband had been between jobs. Mom was on a fixed income. I was selfish for even being upset about it. I told her I wanted the money back immediately. She laughed. She actually laughed. She said they'd already spent most of it on the resort, the flights, the excursions. There was nothing to give back. I should just let it go and be happy they were enjoying themselves. I hung up. My sister called 30 seconds later. She'd heard from Mom. She wanted to smooth things over. She tried the same approach, family obligation, shared resources, my supposed selfishness. She told me I was overreacting. She reminded me of all the times they'd helped me when I was younger, conveniently forgetting that I'd paid them back for every single instance. She said I was being petty and vindictive. I should be grateful they even included me in the family anymore. I asked her if she understood what she'd done was illegal. She scoffed. She said I wouldn't do anything about it. I was too much of a pushover. I always had been. That's why they knew they could take the money without consequences. I told her she was right about one thing. I wouldn't cry about it. Then I hung up on her too. I sat in my apartment for about an hour, just thinking. I wasn't angry. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that makes you throw things or yell. I was cold, calculated, clear-headed. They'd stolen from me. They'd planned it. They'd executed it knowing exactly what they were doing. And they felt entitled to it. They thought I was weak, spineless, someone they could use and discard. I opened my laptop and got to work. First, I called the bank again. I spoke to a supervisor this time. I explained the situation clearly and calmly. Unauthorized access to my accounts. Identity theft. Fraud. I wanted to file a formal report. The supervisor walked me through the process. I confirmed that I had not given anyone permission to access my funds. I confirmed that the transactions were made without my knowledge or consent. The supervisor flagged the account and started the investigation process. She asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes without hesitation. Next, I called the police. I filed a report for identity theft and financial fraud. I gave them my mother's and sister's names, their addresses, their phone numbers. I provided bank statements showing the unauthorized transfers. The officer taking the report asked if I was sure I wanted to pursue this against family members. I told him I'd never been more sure of anything. Then I froze all my accounts. Checking, savings, credit cards, everything. I set up alerts for any attempted transactions. I changed every password I had. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything. I made sure that if they tried to access anything else, they'd hit a brick wall. After that, I contacted the 3 major credit bureaus and placed fraud alerts on my credit report. I wanted a paper trail. I wanted documentation. I wanted evidence that would hold up if this went to court. It was past midnight when I finished. I felt exhausted but focused. I knew what would happen next. They were in Mexico, probably enjoying their resort, charging meals and drinks to the credit cards they'd opened in my name. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I'd roll over and accept it. They were wrong. Update 1. The bank moved faster than I expected. By the next morning, they'd flagged every account my mother and sister had access to. The credit cards they'd been using, cards they'd opened using my information and credit score, were frozen. The fraud investigation was officially underway, and the bank's security team had already identified multiple red flags in the transaction patterns. I got a call from the detective assigned to my case. He'd reviewed the police report and the bank statements. He confirmed that what they'd done constituted identity theft and wire fraud, both of which carried serious legal consequences. He asked if I'd had any contact with the suspects since filing the report. I told him about the phone calls. He advised me to keep records of any future communication. My phone started blowing up around noon. My sister called 6 times in a row. My mom called 4. My brother-in-law sent a string of text messages. I didn't answer any of them. I let them go to voicemail. I wanted everything documented. The voicemails were frantic. My sister's voice was shrill, panicked. She said their cards weren't working. They'd tried to pay for lunch and been declined. They'd tried to book a snorkeling excursion and couldn't process payment. She demanded to know what I'd done. She called me vindictive, psychotic, cruel. She said I was ruining their vacation over nothing. My mom's messages were similar but angrier. She accused me of sabotaging them. She said I was being ungrateful and spiteful. She threatened to cut me out of the family permanently if I didn't fix whatever I'd done to their accounts. I saved every message, every voicemail, every text. All of it went into a folder I labeled evidence. By evening, the messages had shifted in tone. My sister was crying in her voicemails now. She begged me to call her back. She said they were stuck at the resort with no way to pay their bill. The hotel was threatening to involve local authorities. They'd maxed out their personal cards trying to cover expenses before those got frozen too. They couldn't afford food. They couldn't afford transportation. They were stranded. My mom's messages became pleading. She said I was being unreasonable. She promised they'd pay me back somehow. She asked me to just unfreeze one card so they could get home. She said the kids were scared and hungry. She said this was all a misunderstanding and we could work it out if I just talked to them. I didn't respond. I had my birthday dinner alone that night. I ordered takeout and ate it in my apartment, scrolling through the bank's fraud investigation updates on my phone. The detective had called earlier to inform me that warrants were being prepared. My mother and sister would be arrested upon their return to the United States. The charges would include identity theft, wire fraud, and unauthorized access to financial accounts. I ate my birthday dinner with that knowledge sitting comfortably in my chest. Update 2. On the day of my actual birthday, I got a call from an unknown number. I answered. It was the resort manager in Cancun. He apologized for contacting me, but explained that he'd gotten my number from my mother. She'd told him I was responsible for their financial situation and could resolve the payment issue. The manager was professional but firm. My family had accumulated a bill of over $3,000 at the resort. Their cards were all declined. They had no way to pay. Resort policy required them to settle their account before leaving the property. If they couldn't pay, he would have no choice but to involve local law enforcement. I told him I had no affiliation with those guests. They were not authorized to use my name or credit information. He should pursue whatever legal remedies he deemed appropriate. Then I hung up. My sister called 2 minutes later, hysterical. She'd heard the conversation. She screamed at me through the phone. She called me every name she could think of. She said I was destroying their lives over money. She said the kids were crying. She said they were going to be arrested in a foreign country because of me. She begged me to send money, just enough to get them home. She'd pay me back. She swore she would. She said I was being inhuman. I asked her if she'd felt inhuman when she stole $14,000 from me. Then I hung up again. The detective called that afternoon to update me. My mother and sister had attempted to use my identity to open additional credit lines from Mexico. They'd been declined due to the fraud alerts I'd placed. Each attempt was being logged as additional evidence of identity theft. The charges were piling up. He estimated they were looking at significant jail time if convicted. I thanked him for the update and went back to my day. That evening, my uncle called. He was my mom's brother, someone I'd always respected. He'd heard about the situation from other family members. He asked me to explain what had happened. I told him everything. The theft, the justifications, the entitlement, the insults. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was sorry. He said my mother and sister had crossed a line he couldn't defend. He asked what I wanted to happen. I told him I wanted justice. I wanted accountability. I wanted them to understand that actions have consequences. He said he understood. Then he asked if there was any way to resolve this without criminal charges. He offered to pay their resort bill and get them home if I'd consider dropping the charges. I told him I appreciated the offer, but declined. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about principle. They'd treated me like a resource to be exploited. They'd shown me exactly what I meant to them. I wasn't going to pretend that didn't matter. He sighed but didn't push. He said he respected my decision even if he didn't fully agree with it. We ended the call on decent terms. My phone buzzed with another message from my sister. It was a photo. My 2 nephews, sitting on a hotel bed, looking tired and confused. The message said I was doing this to innocent children. I was traumatizing them. Their trauma was on my hands. I blocked her number. Update 3. They made it home 4 days later. My uncle had eventually paid their resort bill and bought them emergency flights back to the States. He did it for the kids, he told me later, not for my mother or sister. I thanked him for keeping me informed. The police were waiting at the airport when they landed. My mother and sister were arrested the moment they stepped off the plane. The detective had coordinated with airport security. They were taken into custody, processed, and held for arraignment. My brother-in-law took the kids home. He called me that night. He was apologetic, embarrassed. He said he'd had no idea what they'd planned. He'd thought the vacation was funded legitimately. He didn't condone what they'd done. He hoped I could forgive him for being oblivious. I told him I held nothing against him. He hadn't stolen from me. We ended the call cordially. The arraignment happened the next day. Both my mother and sister were formally charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and unauthorized access to financial accounts. Bail was set at $50,000 each. They couldn't afford it. They sat in jail for 3 days before my uncle posted bail for my mother. My sister stayed in jail. Her husband didn't have the money, and no one else was willing to help. My mother called me from my uncle's house. She was crying. She apologized. She said she'd made a terrible mistake. She didn't know what she'd been thinking. She blamed my sister for convincing her it was okay. She said she'd been weak and foolish. She begged me to drop the charges. She said she was too old for this. She said it would kill her. I asked her if she remembered what she'd told me when I first confronted her. She went quiet. I reminded her. She'd said I'd make the money back, that they deserved the vacation, that I was selfish for being upset. I asked her if she still believed that. She started crying harder. She said no. She said she was sorry. She said it over and over. I told her I'd think about it. Then I hung up. My sister's husband called the next day. He asked if I'd consider writing a letter to the prosecutor, something that might reduce her charges. He said the kids needed their mother. He said she'd learned her lesson. He said she was sorry even if she hadn't said it directly to me. I asked him why she hadn't called me herself. He admitted she was too proud, too ashamed. I told him that wasn't my problem. He got quiet. Then he asked me what I wanted. What would it take for me to help her? I told him I wanted acknowledgement. Real acknowledgement. Not apologies born from consequences, but from genuine understanding of what they'd done. I wanted them to sit with the weight of their actions. I wanted them to feel a fraction of what I felt when I saw my savings account drained 2 days before my birthday. He said he'd talk to her. We hung up. The trial date was set for 2 months out. In the meantime, my mother started attending court-mandated counseling. My sister sat in jail, unable to make bail. The prosecutor's office contacted me to discuss my role as the victim. They asked if I'd be willing to testify. I said yes. They asked if I'd consider a plea deal if one was offered. I said I'd listen, but made no promises. My bank completed their investigation and returned most of my money. The fraud claim was approved. I got $13,800 back. The remaining $547 was tied up in expenses that couldn't be recovered. I deposited the returned funds into a new account at a different bank, one that no one else knew about. I changed my phone number. I moved to a new apartment. I didn't tell anyone in my family where I was going. My uncle was the only one who had my new contact information, and only because I trusted him to respect my boundaries. Slowly, carefully, I started rebuilding. Final update. The plea deal came 6 weeks later. My mother agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for probation, restitution, and community service. No jail time beyond what she'd already served. She'd pay me back $7,000 over the course of 2 years. It wasn't the full amount, but it was something. The prosecutor recommended I accept it. She was elderly. First offense. The courts would likely be lenient anyway. I accepted, not because I forgave her, but because I was tired. Because dragging this out wouldn't give me back what I'd lost. Because I wanted to move forward. My sister refused the plea deal offered to her. She insisted she'd done nothing wrong. She took it to trial. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution of $14,000 plus court costs. Her lawyer filed an appeal. It was denied. She served 14 months before being released on parole. I didn't attend her release hearing. I didn't send a message. I didn't acknowledge it at all. My mother completed her community service and paid the restitution in full by the end of the first year. She sent the final check with a handwritten note. It said she was sorry, that she understood if I never wanted to see her again, that she hoped someday I might let her try to make amends properly. I cashed the check. I didn't respond to the note. My uncle visits me sometimes. We get lunch. We talk about normal things. He never brings up my mother or sister unless I do first. I appreciate that. He's the only family member I maintained contact with. Everyone else got cut off. Blocked numbers. Returned letters. No exceptions. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. If I think I went too far. If I wish I'd handled it differently. The answer is no. They stole from me. They justified it. They insulted me when I called them out. They only showed remorse when they faced consequences. That's not family. That's exploitation. I rebuilt my savings. It took time, but I got there. I went to Colorado eventually. I stood on a mountain and felt the cold air in my lungs and realized I didn't carry their weight anymore. I'd set it down. I'd walked away, and I was lighter for it. My birthday came around again this year. I spent it how I wanted. No obligations. No guilt. No thieves pretending to be family. Just me, living the life I'd earned with money I'd saved and freedom I'd fought for. They taught me a valuable lesson that year. Not everyone who shares your blood deserves your trust. And sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is let people experience the full consequences of their choices. I didn't cry when I found out they'd stolen from me. I didn't yell. I didn't break down. I smiled, filed the reports, and watched them learn what it meant to cross someone who knew their worth. That was enough.